Hello, my name is Daniel Christopher Badger, and today I'm going to show you how to use the Unity Animator. By default, you will need to add an animator to your object that you wish to animate, and you will need to set up a controller. You can create a controller by going in here, creating a controller, or when we make our animation later, it'll also create an animation controller. These are the lifeblood of the animator. It tells the animator what it should be doing at any given point. It takes in parameters and states. That's a finite state machine. Now, it has some key states with entry, exit, in any state. We don't need the exit node right now, so I'm just going to move that away, or we won't need it in this example. We will need the entry node. Now, by default, whatever the first state you make will be your default state. It'll be the one that it transitioned to upon entry. For this example, I'm going to make this our idle state, and I am not going to attach any form of motion to it. So on entry, it'll transition to idle, and it'll do no motion, which is fine. When we come back over to our scene, we will see that we have our player object, a sprite render with a basic square on it, a player movement script, which I will show later, a rigid body 2D that is set to kinematic, and the animator with the controller we have right here. The controller is the one that we have open over here, so when we press play, it'll go to the idle state. We can test that by clicking on the player, going to animator, and seeing that it is playing in the idle animation that doesn't exist. So we're going to stop this, and we're going to go back to our scene. We have down here this very simple arrow animation that is 160 pixels by 40 pixels. When I brought this in as a sprite sheet, it came in as sprite mode single. What that means is it doesn't realize it's a sprite sheet. So we have to tell it that it is a multiple sprite sheet. Then we have to go into the sprite editor after applying that change and slice it. This tab we don't need. What we do need is this slice tab. We are going to go to grid by cell count, tell it that it has 4 columns and 1 row. From there, we're going to delete existing and slice. Now, before we do that, one very cool thing that I think everyone should know when using the Unity Animator is you don't need to be scared of empty grid squares. If you had another grid square over here, let's just say I had a 5th grid square, but it had no animation in it. It had no thing that I wanted to do. That was the size that I had made it. Unity will be smart enough to, by default, not keep that in the animation. Now, if we want it to be kept, we can engage this. However, in this example, we don't have that, so we don't need it. You're going to hit slice, nothing fancy will play, but this little small asterisk will appear up here, which tells you that you need to apply the change. You can leave this without applying it, and that can sometimes leave you really confused. Then you just close the sprite editor, because you don't need it at this point, and you have 4 animation sprites. As you can see, looking up here, they now are broken up as sprites. I'm going to take this, and I'm going to drag this into the scene. By dragging it into the scene, it'll tell it that it is an anim type, aka an animation, that is being made. I'm going to call this arrow cycle. And now all of a sudden I have an arrow cycle animation clip, and I have an arrow animation 0 animation controller. Now we can just delete this because we don't need it. We can delete the single first frame that put into the scene because we don't need that either. All we really care about is this animation clip. So we're going to go into our animation controller and create a state for it. Let's call this state player walk, player, oh, caps lock turned on, player, oh, player walk down, and attach this arrow cycle component to it. We will then put this I'm just gonna put everything in a simple organized state, and we'll go look at it, because right, we want to see it in scene. Well, it's not doing anything. And that is because we don't have any transitions to tell it to move from idle to player walk down. So what we're going to do is we're going to add from any state a transition to player walk down. We're also going to add from any state a player transition to idle. Now, as we look at these, there are no conditions. So it's going to ignore this transition, both of these. So what we need to do is we need to add parameters to the scene to allow transitioning. In this example, we're going to use ints. I'm going to call them velocity x, and I'm going to call the other one velocity. Oh, I need to make sure I lowercase them. Y. Now, these aren't being set anywhere yet, so if we were to play our scene, they're not going to do anything. However, if I go into this scene and I click on our player and I go to this script right here and I hit edit, we will see that I have these two lines right here. What these do is set the integer of this named integer inside the animator to whatever movement direction dot x rounded to an int is. Now, in Unity, when you use the input system, it'll bring it in as either 0, 1, or -1. That is very useful for our situation here. Now, we don't need this anymore, and you can look at the code all you want. It's just a very basic movement code. What we need to know is that these are now being set. So we can add conditions to this. For our walk down, we're going to want velocity x to be equal to 0 and velocity y to be greater than or less than 0. This is because when you walk downwards, that velocity y is going to be negative. So when we come back into our scene and we hit play, when we walk down, our animation plays. However, it's playing constantly, and that's not something we want. We want it to be able to go back to idle. So what we need to do is we need to add conditions to this transition. Let's set these to be velocity x is equal to 0, and velocity y is also equal to 0. So this only happens truly when our player is idle and not moving. If we go back into the game real fast, we can see that when we walk in any direction other than down, the animation doesn't play, and once we are done, we leave the animation. Granted, we have to wait for the animation to play first. Now, in any normal state, you're going to have more than quickly. Let's just quickly make a transition here to a new state and call it player walk right. We're going to use the same animation because that's fine, and we're going to add transitions so this only happens when the player is walking right with velocity of x greater than 0 and a velocity of y equal to 0. Now you can do this for all of the other states, right? You walk right, the animation plays. You walk left, the animation will stop. You walk up, the animation doesn't play. You walk down, the animation does play. Now you can go in here into the animator and tweak these transitions so they happen instantly. They have a, exit time, or they have a fixed duration, or whatever you want it to be. For now, we're just going to leave this alone, and we're going to talk about the other thing that is really important about these animations. If you double click on it, it opens up this menu. By selecting the player, we can go into this animation and add, with this right here, an event. You can put this event on any frame of the animation, and this event can call a function from anything. Now, of course, we don't have any functions in player movement. right now. So it's not going to do anything. But this is something you should know how to do. You can call methods from scripts on whatever has the animator from animations. This is something that I think people should know more about. I'm going to remove it because we don't need it. However, that is something you should know about. Also, if you ever need to replace this animation, you can drag this animation, or you can drag this sprite sheet into here and it'll replace all of the frames. You do have to do it one by one. So, for example, we can make all of the frames just the first frame of the animation. And then when we go and we play the game, we go and we kind of have to get rid of this and we walk down. It's just the first frame of the animation, which is kind of funny, but that is something you should know how to do. That is the basics of using the Unity Animator. Now, surprise, I am a real human being. I did want to say that I am doing this for the Echoes project that I am on. I do believe that this is something very important that people should know, but I really wanted to say something different. Uh, I'm really grateful to the Echoes project, and I think more people should check it out. So if you're on the team and you are seeing this, good job. I'm very glad you're here. If you're not on the team, put your eyes on it. We have a website that you should go look at. Uh, we are part of RIT, Rochester Institute of Technology. So if you're somehow seeing this and don't know what we are a group of game devs led by a professor who is working on making impactful games. Uh, Games that make you feel strong emotions. This is a requirement for our class to make a presentation, but this is truly something I feel very strongly about, and I do think more people should be paying attention to. So I just want to say thank you to Professor Mesh, and thank you to the Echoes project as a whole. I hope people use this on the project in order to make our animations better and to polish our games. Not that our games aren't polished, just as a polishing step that more people should know about. I hope everyone has a good time, and goodbye.